All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL props video. Going to be touching on the top prop bets for the divisional round in the NFL on both PrizePicks and Underdog. Going to start with a quick recap, though, of last week. So last week was a very good week. Hopefully, you guys were able to take advantage of that. And I'm kind of starting with this recap to call out that obviously a lot of the really good prop bets that we had last week were the fantasy score props. The Julio Jones receptions prop, that was one that got bumped throughout the week. We had a really good prop bet for Wicks that did not end up working out, but that ended up being like minus 175 for him to get over 2.5 receptions. Turns out, kind of predictably so, my Packers destroyed the Dallas Cowboys. I'm sure you guys remember my takes on the Packers last week. But all in all, I think the preview video is going to be good because we can potentially get some pretty big edges. And then later on as the week progresses, Saturday I can come out with a video and Sunday I can come out with a video for those games, seeing if we're getting any different edge as well, because obviously lines are constantly updating throughout the week. Let's go ahead and start out with the first game that we have. That's going to be the Houston Texans versus the Baltimore Ravens. So it's going to be about a 9.5 point spread. 43.5 is going to be the over and under. Yes, the Texans are a little bit banged up, receiver wise and whatnot. That didn't seem to matter. Now, you could argue a little bit of fluky production in the passing game, but all in all, it worked. That it's kind of been the case this whole year. And you could almost say that about Tampa Bay as well, but you could almost argue the best teams in the league are all left right now, as it's currently sitting. So I do want to get into the Texans Ravens, just looking at the best props that we're getting in that game. And guys, we are getting a lot of fantasy score props right now. I'll touch on those when we go game by game. And starting with Dalton Schultz is going to be a good one for the Texans. And so his under fantasy score at 9 is kind of popping up. That's because the average sportsbook line is favoring him to get 8.1 for a fantasy score. And I think that's very much predicated on the fact that this is a very difficult matchup for him. You look at last week, it was also a difficult matchup for him. Now, yes, he did have a terrible drop in that game. And then his only other catch was a touchdown. See, that's concerning to me. That seems a little bit of fluky production. And you go against the Ravens, who are also a very good defense. It wouldn't be shocking to see him struggle this week. Now, these two teams did meet at the start of the season. I don't think we want to draw any conclusions to that, except for I remember in week 1, and it sounded crazy at the time to say, I remember saying, guys, I know the stats aren't there. I know everyone's been bashing CJ Stroud in the preseason, but I was like, he kind of looks sharp. That was like my only takeaway from week 1. And then week 2, that sharpness actually turned into production. And then, the rest is history. So that was definitely interesting, that game that he produced, or that he played well, I should say. He didn't exactly produce touchdowns. So Ravens are a good matchup though. At the same time, for what it's worth, we're talking about pass completions here for CJ Stroud. The Ravens are a good defense, don't get me wrong, but you look at the quarterbacks that they played, they seemingly played a bunch of the quarterbacks at the best time to play him. CJ Stroud in his first NFL start and whatnot, that happened a bunch for them. So it is tough to grade exactly how good the Ravens defense is, although we know it's good. It is a good defense for sure. And so that is why we are seeing a lot of the unders being favored here. So we're seeing Dalton Schultz for under 3.5 receptions is one that's popping up. That correlates pretty well with the fantasy score. So if they take this one away, guys, you could then jump onto this, but we can see the fantasy score for Dalton Schultz is the only good one. Now, I do think that this is interesting for Nico Collins. We can see the average sportsbook line has his receptions prop set at 5.5. They're heavily favoring the over there. And so that's why at 6, it got bumped up, but the projection data likes him to get 6.8. And so with that, I don't mind the fantasy score. I would say this is a little bit touchdown dependent. And so is Devin Singletary. You look at the 9-point spread, I think it's much more accurate this week. And so you look at that, I could kind of agree with maybe Devin Singletary not getting a rushing touchdown. And that's what it's going to take for him to get this over, or maybe just gets a lot of short dump offs in the passing game, but I just don't want to bank on that. And then for what it's worth, we are getting some other okay lines. This is a pretty big prop line difference for CJ Stroud passing yards. If you think the Houston Texans are going to keep this game close, Singletary over rush attempts would be a good one as well. But overall, I feel like the lines kind of would go and correlate pretty well with everyone's kind of thoughts for this game. I do want to call this one out. On the underdog, CJ Stroud for under fantasy score is a decent one as well, just because we can see on PrizePicks the unders being favored there as well. So let's go ahead and move on into the Baltimore Ravens, hoping that we are getting a little bit of better props for this team. Now, it is kind of worth noting that the starters have not played in 2 weeks now. Most of them rested in their final game. So maybe they're going to be shaking off the rust a little bit. I doubt it, but it is always something to maybe monitor. But we're going to see, guys, right now we're not getting any elite props, I would say Zay Flowers. I don't want to bet this because this is being favored as a push, and you can see the projection data likes him to get 5.3. Yeah, I just don't want to touch that. And I do want to call it the Lamar Jackson fantasy score prop. Again, this is one where Underdog is typically more aggressive with their projections, and so we typically are betting the under on Underdog, betting the over on PrizePicks. It's a decent middling opportunity. On all the data is kind of in between. It's more saying bet the under on Underdog, but all in all, small edge there. And that's kind of it for me. We did have a better Lamar Jackson prop at the start of the week, but that one has since disappeared. So moving on to the next game, we got my Green Bay Packers versus the San Francisco 49ers. So last week, guys, you guys were probably watching the video, and I was like, man, that is a strange line. Like, why are the Packers that much of dogs? Like, I was like, I could really see the Packers blowing out the Dallas Cowboys. And that ended up happening. And I want to say, and I've touched on this in different videos, it's because they got the ball first. I'm not even joking. So like literally, guys, if they don't start out with the football, I don't think they're winning this game. It's like literally just that. I was in my group, my friends group for fantasy football and whatnot, just messaging them. I'm like, well, we're going to win. Like the coin toss, they got the ball. I'm like, well, we're going to win. It's just, it is that though. Their defense is much better when the Packers are playing with the lead. It's just a big thing there. The offense also does play better when they're not playing from behind. It just goes hand in hand. And the offense is pretty good. Now going against the Niners, obviously they're a very good team. It's very tough for me to gauge this situation because I've been talking up the Green Bay Packers really this whole season, telling you guys they're one of the best teams in the league when they're not making these dumb elementary mistakes. We saw last week they still made some of those dumb mistakes, although it was minimalized. And so if they can still cut back on some of those mistakes, even more so, yeah, they could easily win this game. But that being said, the Niners are a great team. We know that. The only way the Packers are going to win this game is if Jordan Love continues to play like a stud and really outplays Brock Purdy by a good margin and Joe Barry doesn't get absolutely destroyed. And I don't know. I definitely expect this offense to produce for the Niners. There'd have to be some sort of fumble, something like that. Or I'm telling you guys, the Packers need to start with the football. So all in all, that's my long way of saying I probably would think that the Niners are going to win this game. I mean, that's not really a hot take, but all in all, it still wouldn't be shocking to see the Green Bay Packers to win this game as well. Like, yes, I'm thinking the Niners are going to win this game, but all in all, would it be shocking to see the Packers produce and win this game? No, it wouldn't. Again, you got a situation for the Niners where a lot of their starters didn't really play for 2 weeks. They could come out a little bit rusty. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, I definitely expect those two to have a good game. But to me, the biggest difference maker in this game is going to be George Kittle. I fully expect George Kittle to have a very good game in this game, like Jake Ferguson did, like we expected with Jake Ferguson last week. That's just how you beat the Packers. Their linebackers are bad in coverage. They got kind of stiff hips, which just means that it's easier for middle routes because they're not able to adjust and whatnot. So I'm actually curious. I want to start out with the Niners. I want to see what George Kittle's lines are because that's really what I want to see because I feel like we are getting the biggest edge that we're going to get potentially with George Kittle, depending on the lines. And so 4 receptions. Yeah, I probably want to bet the over there fantasy score. A little bit of a better bet there on Underdog where it's probably a little bit lower than it should be. But yeah, 4 receptions. I feel like that's a great chance to be a push. By all means, I think that's a pretty strong bet for George Kittle. From there, what can we roll with? Juwan Jennings for over 3.5 fantasy score. I mean, maybe all it takes is one big play for him. I could potentially get behind that. So guys, I'm looking at this for CMC, the average sportsbook line. I'm guessing that the anytime touchdowns are not being pulled in here fully. Just as an FYI, like I fully doubt that this is the case. And also this is part of the issue with doing the data a little bit too soon. I'm guessing that's the case. There's no way because he's going to score a touchdown. And let's just give him a touchdown here. I would say that line is correct. So let's just cross that one off there. And then from there, the lines that we're getting are seemingly correct, I would say. Brock Purdy, he just has to play a game in which he's not throwing an INT pretty much for the Niners to probably win. Is he going to get over 19 for a fantasy score? I mean, maybe not. It is very much hit or miss. Like, it could just be the CMC game. It could just be George Kittle. Heck, it could be Deebo Samuel getting a rushing touchdown. Now, the Packers defense, I don't know if you thought they looked good last week, but they really haven't been that good this whole season. So I don't mind the idea of stacking like Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, heck, CMC, George Kittle over fantasy score. Like, I'm kind of okay with that because it's a little bit shocking that like they have the talent, don't get me wrong, but they played a little bit better last week than I expect. Now, looking at the Green Bay Packers, I will say I do like the fantasy score props that we're getting. We got Luke Musgrave for over 5 for a fantasy score. And I don't know, personally, guys, I would say that is a bet that I don't really want to target. And that's simply going to be because he played only 15 snaps to 45 for Tucker Kraft. And so I know he was involved in the passing game, but man, he has been such a source of frustration. Like, he almost didn't not make that play. And it's funny, at the beginning of the year, I was mentioning this so much throughout the season. I'm like, people would like Jordan Love a lot more if Luke Musgrave just simply wasn't on the field, and pretty much saying that if it was Tucker Kraft, people would be loving them some Jordan Love. And that's because Luke Musgrave kept messing up these big, easy plays by just simply falling down or dropping the pass or turning the wrong way. The chemistry wasn't there, don't get me wrong. And it was, as a Packers fan, it was great to see him not mess that play up. But Tucker Kraft is the better tight end. And if he's playing more, sure, they kind of scheme Musgrave open. That probably won't be there again. Tucker Kraft is just a more reliable guy. And so, sure, can Luke Musgrave get the over there? Yes. Does the data kind of like him? Yes. I would much rather bet Tucker Kraft at 5.5 than I would Luke Musgrave at 5. Can they both produce? They definitely can. But to me, Tucker Kraft feels like the safer option. From there, I do find it kind of strange that we're getting Aaron Jones as such a low fantasy score line, simply because like the rushing attempts prop was pretty easy last week. He's just going to be on the field a lot, especially if A.J. Dillon is out. That is something we do need to monitor. As it sits right now, A.J. Dillon has not been practicing. So with that, we have seen Aaron Jones play a lot, like 80% of the snaps. That's going to continue, but I want to call out the rushing attempts. Over 20 the last 4 games. You want to look at why they're winning? It's because they've been able to establish the run. You look at the start of the season, they had to kind of change their offense a little bit when Aaron Jones was out. You know, he's one of the better playmaking running backs in the league. He can't stay healthy. That's the issue. And so I do think he's going to get force-fed the football. This is another tough matchup going against Dallas, going against the Niners, but so is Dallas. So I don't know. That to me is going to be one I want to stay away from, as is this one for Wicks, because I think Wicks is their best receiver, so I don't really want to be touching that. I think that actually is a better over bet there on Underdog at 35.5. Luke Musgrave, I'd be fine with betting the under there. I actually kind of agree with that. Again, if he's not going to be playing that much, that does worry me. Romeo Doubs, I would be fine with for under his fantasy score. Jaden Reed, it probably is going to be more of his week, or I would almost argue, man, this is a low rushing attempt for Aaron Jones. Wow. I would almost argue that the line that we are getting on Christian Watson when it comes out would be too low. And I don't know that just yet, but if he's going to be one more week healthy, to me, that would be much more encouraging. For what it's worth, guys, let's look at this. Tucker Kraft, over 2.5 receptions. I kind of like that. Jordan Love, over 16 on Underdog. That's going to be the bet. It is funny. Like every single week, his fantasy score popped up as a good prop bet pretty much. Or at the start of the season, I was just telling you guys to bet his over fantasy score. I think this is the first week in which the data is actually telling us to bet the under on PrizePicks. Maybe it's no longer the free square that it had been, but I do think that's a good over bet on Underdog still. Slight edge, 0.5. We'll take that. All right, so getting into the Sunday games then, we got Detroit versus Tampa Bay. So Detroit is favored to win by 6.5 points. I did say at the top of the video that I thought all the best teams in the league, were still playing. I don't know. The Rams felt like they probably should have won that game. I would almost argue the Rams are a better team than the Bucs too, but both teams won. Looking at the game, it is about a 6.5 point spread. I would probably agree with that. Like the Bucs aren't that good. It's just like for me, how many times can Baker Mayfield get away with just throwing the football up in the air and having his receiver come down with it? Because man, and I would have to look this up, but it feels like 50% of his like touchdown passes have just been like, all right, Mike Evans, go do something. And I don't know, that just doesn't seem sustainable. Like if Baker has 2 INTs this game, especially if they're playing from behind like that, wouldn't it be shocking? I don't know. It's strange. He has looked better over the second half, but it's still, some of his production is fluky. So all in all, I probably agree with the 6.5 line that we're getting for the Lions. And I know a lot of people don't always like those game takes, but we've been pretty accurate at being able to predict when game lines are strange and whatnot. And I feel like it just sets the proper expectation for that upcoming game and whatnot. And so for me, like, I do think the Tampa Bay is going to be playing from behind. I do think they're going to have to throw the football. So someone like Trey Palmer popping up at 5, I like that. Trey Palmer has been a player that I've liked this whole season. What's strange, though, is we're seeing this. At 19.5 for receiving yards, the data is heavily favoring the under there. But all in all, if you give him around 20 receiving yards, that's 3 receptions. That could happen. Maybe a little bit of touchdown equity in there. He has played well. I mean, maybe in limited roles, like, again, 2 targets, 1 catch, touchdown. I don't know if we exactly want to trust that, but if they're going to be playing from behind, it does make sense. We did see Mike Evans popping up as a good prop bet for over his fantasy score. He wasn't really able to get anything going in the last game, but this is going to be his easiest match. I shouldn't say that. Philly's an easy matchup as well, but if he's going to still get the targets, like I don't mind that over fantasy score. Should be able to get there, especially if Chris Godwin's going to be good to go. it is funny. David Moore was actually popping up as one of the better prop bets that we have. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't want to do that. At first play, he gets his over. I'm like, oh, data is right there. Go figure, right? But we're not getting any prop bets for him. That's something we might potentially get. Kate Odd and under fantasy score. I don't know if I exactly agree with that. Again, given the game script, I don't know if I exactly want to touch that. Rashad White for under 15.5 rush attempts. I do think I could get behind. If they're going to be playing from behind, it's going to be tough for them to get Rashad White going. And like, I know he's gotten a lot of carries basically every single game, but yeah, if they're going to be playing from behind, I think this is what we would expect from him. Like, so that's what you guys could potentially stack, you know, maybe under for Rashad White rush attempts, maybe over for Mike Evans fantasy score. Like, that's a decent way to go about stacking based off of how you guys think the game is going to go. I think Detroit's going to win this game. So from there, let's move on into Detroit, seeing if we're getting any good prop bets for them. And so looking at Jahmyr Gibbs under fantasy score, not one I'm personally interested in touching. Jameson Williams for over 7 for a fantasy score. I mean, maybe. David Montgomery for under his. Again, if Detroit's going to be winning, I don't know if I exactly want to touch that. So to me, some of these prop bets that we're getting for Detroit, I personally right now, I don't want to touch them just yet. Because again, like if they're going to be winning, I think Gibbs will be involved for sure. David Montgomery will be more involved if they're playing with the lead. And so Jameson Williams also getting over his fantasy score then wouldn't make sense as well. So to me, I kind of want to stay away from most of these as it sits right now. Again, I would say this correlates though. David Montgomery for over 13.5 rush attempts, Rashad White for under 15.5 rush attempts. I would say those two would correlate pretty heavily with how I see this game going. If you guys don't see Detroit winning by a touchdown, and maybe you don't want to do those props. So all in all, this is probably the game in which, I don't know, I'm talking through it and I feel like I don't have the best feel for it right now as I'm talking through it, seeing the props and whatnot. So maybe, again, as it sits right now, maybe just to stay away. So moving on to the last game, is this game going to be on Peacock? That's a little bit of a joke, but that'd be good for the Chiefs, I guess. Looking at the Chiefs versus the Bills, about a 3-point spread or so, 2.5. 45 is going to be the over and under, so a very high scoring game. Looking at it offensively, I think we know maybe what to expect right now. It's going to be a lot of Isaiah Pacheco. It's going to be a lot of Rice. Then it's going to be a lot of Travis Kelce. That's just what's going to happen for the Chiefs. For the Bills, it was pretty awesome that the data loved Khalil Shakir with Gabe Davis out. That one was one that got pulled. And then I loved Dalton Kincaid. And the first touchdown went to Dawson Knox. I'm like, no. And then the next touchdown went to Dalton Kincaid. So that was pretty fun. And we're probably going to be looking at a lot of the same players. I haven't looked at this just yet. So there might be a little bit of sticker shock. Yeah, but look, okay. Yeah, I don't know if I exactly agree with that. Josh Allen for under 1.5 passing touchdowns. I don't know. I don't love that. I do like James Cook for over 2.5 receptions. James Cook was much more involved last week than I would have expected. And so with that, against Pittsburgh, who is a good rush defense, like he got 18 carries in that game, and they had their way with him. Now I know it was kind of a weird weather game and whatnot, but all in all, if he's going to be getting that much work against a good rush defense, I'm not saying the Chiefs aren't a good rush defense, but I would say the Steelers were, I guess they're a little bit banged up with Watt out, but all in all, it was encouraging. Let's put it that way. And so for him to get over 2.5 receptions, I don't mind that. Do we think this game's going to be a shootout? If you do, that would correlate pretty well with James Cook getting over receptions. And then you could also do Josh Allen for over 32.5 pass attempts. Again, if you guys think the game is going to be a shootout, don't mind that. We are seeing Dalton Kincaid for under fantasy score this week. Right now, as it sits, again, this stuff could change. We'll see. From there, Diggs for over fantasy score, better bet there on underdog, but that's about a 50-50% likely to hit. So yeah, really not getting too many huge edges here for the Bills. Let's go to move on into the Chiefs. And so looking at the Chiefs, yeah, this is where we're starting to get some bigger edges. I mean, Justin Watson for over 4 for a fantasy score. He's been playing a lot of snaps. We got Patrick Mahomes for over 19 for a fantasy score. And then we got Isaiah Pacheco for over 15 for a rush attempts prop. So last week was one of the rare times where his rush attempts prop got bumped. And I was like, I think we could still roll with that because I think we're going to see a heavy dosage of Isaiah Pacheco. This line started at 14.5 this week as well. And I think the same thing, guys. They should establish the run with Isaiah Pacheco in this matchup if they're going to be able. If not, Buffalo's going to win this game by a decent amount. But that's where I'm like, all right, Isaiah Pacheco, he should at least be able to get 15 rush attempts. I would have put the line at 16. So there is still a slight edge there. Let's take a peek at Justin Watson, why he is pulling up as a good prop bet. So everyone's injured. Let's call that out first. And so looking at the snaps, he played 68% of the snaps. Like this was really not fluky. This is what you would have expected because this is what has happened the whole season. So it's, in a weird way, it's a little bit of a funnel offense. Like it's Kelce, it's Rice, it's Pacheco. Then it's Watson or Gray. Now, sure, you're going to have some splash plays from Hardman. CH has been playing well for what it's worth. Maybe Richie James, maybe MVS, but for the most part, we kind of know who the producers are here. And so, again, if this game's going to be high scoring, maybe the Chiefs are playing from behind. I can get behind Justin Watson getting like 3 targets in this game and getting over 4 for a fantasy score. That takes 2 catches for 21 yards. So I don't mind that. From there, Mahomes, I think that's self-explanatory. Again, if you think the game's going to be a shootout, don't mind that. From there, a little bit touchdown dependent for Pacheco, 15 fantasy score. From there, I don't really feel like we need to be placing any of these prop bets. So let's go ahead and give you guys the bet of the day. Well, I'll show you guys Underdog real quick. So here are just the best prop bets right now for Underdog. Just want to show you guys that. A little bit different there with how they value it and whatnot, but just wanted to show you guys that. Again, CJ Stroud under fantasy score, there's a little bit better. And so right as I was going to place Isaiah Pacheco for over 15 rush attempts, it got pulled. So I don't know what's going on there. These are currently the best prop bets right now. This is me. I want to make that clear. Like, if you're just going based off the data, it's going to be these 3 that are going to be good bets for you guys right now as it sits. But this is a better bet on Underdog, Jordan Love, because it's at 16 for a fantasy score. So you'd be much better off doing that. I'm kind of doing this a little bit for the bit, just because we've been hammering Jordan Love this whole season. Like, why quit now? Is like, if it doesn't work out this week, yeah, it's kind of okay. We're way up money on Jordan Love thus far this season. And again, I think Wicks is kind of his receiver number 1. And so to bet him over 8.5 for a fantasy score, I'm kind of okay with that as well. And then Tucker Kraft was actually a pretty good bet. So if you guys don't want to use those 2, by all means, I get it. We are going to get some decent kicking props, like Jake Moody for over 7.5 for kicking points is one that is a decent prop bet as well. And that's another thing. We're going to get more kicking props, better ones. We're going to get tackles and assist props and whatnot. Those are going to come as well. And so those will be ones I'll touch on in another video for this. But that's going to be all for this preview video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. I do appreciate that. Head on over to 9to5sports.com to get access to the PrizePicks and Underdog cheat sheets. They are available for just $10 a month, both of them included. That's going to be all. Thanks for watching. And as always, let's keep cashing.